Good evening, all. Just making sure you can hear me right, Viber.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thank you. Uh, Good evening, all. And today I want to talk about build an API in Azure without using any code. And mostly I will use different Azure services to implement this. And this is I'm a software developer in Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska, and you will find my handler there. Uh, Before going into the topic, I quickly want to know the audience, whether they were whether you are aware of an API. Can you please raise your hand? I want to see the feel of the audience, so that I know how depth I need to go about APIs by giving background. So if you guys can raise your hand, if you have knowledge on APIs, build APIs. Only 2, 3 hands are raising. Yep. Thanks, guys. So only very less audience have exposure to APIs. I will give high-level overview, but if you need more details or questions, feel free to ask in between. And Vaibhav, please monitor the questions and let haul me.
Sure.
So and so going to the slides. Um, API full form is Application Programming Interface. An API defines the API interface defines the rules, data formats, and protocols to interact with the software, and it helps to access the functionality of the data without requiring developers to share the entirety of the system code base. What it means is, if I want to connect to a third-party CRM API, I don't really need to know how that is built, the whole code base of that system. If I have access to the API with API credentials, I should able to send request data and get response back with the data I'm looking for. APIs help this modern architecture with ease of integrations. We can do integration. It helps us to build integrations with many systems, and the development is ease, and it also reduce the gap between technologies. What it means is, if a system A is built in Java, system B is built in .NET, and system C is built in Python, if I want to work with all this, if my client needs data from all these systems, I can with an API, I really don't need to figure out how they build that API. I just need to access it with credentials, and that helps us to reduce the gap. We can APIs can be in any technology, and we can use it. So for this session, I mostly will be demos, and I want to directly go into the use case. So you kind of understand. I will help you to understand the different Azure services while working on a small use case. In this use case, I want to build a customer information API. This API takes inputs and give a response output in JSON format. Takes customer ID as input, and it retrieves customer demographics and customer revenue data. And the expected output will be something like this JSON output. So this is the high level data flow or design. So the input will be customer ID, and I will go and grab company demographics from Salesforce system, and company revenue data from SQL Server system. And I'll come in both the data format. I already showed you the output how I would like to. So I will transform the data into the JSON how I want and give it a response back to the customer in this way. So for building an API, it's two parts. We need to implementation and also hosting. So first, I want to divide. First, we shall focus on the implementation part. Later, we'll talk about how to host that implementation as a hosted API. For implementation part, I want to use Azure Logic app. So I will share high-level details of Azure Logic app. So Logic app is a PaaS product of Azure, product as a service. Logic apps are used for creating and running automated workflows that integrates with applications, data, services, and systems. Quickly built integration solutions for enterprise and B2B solutions. Simplifies the way to connect legacy, modern, and cutting-edge systems across cloud, on-prem, and hybrid environments. So we can, on a long story short, Logic apps help us to build integration solutions using a user interface. So some of the Logic app competitors are MuleSoft Anypoint Platform, Dell Boomi, Zapper, Jitterbit, IBM App Connect. I will go ahead and do a Logic app demo. Anyone has any questions so far? Or am I going too fast?
I don't see anything on the chat.
Thank you, guys. So I am on my Azure portal. This is a free portal I signed up for 1 month free. So here I created a resource group. The resource group for Azure user group is the resource group. I have already have it testing. If demo gods are not in my favor, I can have something to show you guys. So now I want to create a Logic app. We know what we need to create. First, I will create a Logic app. And team, I am not going too detailed into Logic app. The reason is last month, Vibo did an awesome session on Logic app. There is a video link out there in the Omaha Azure user group YouTube channel. So, and also on LinkedIn too, you should be able to find. That's why I kept high level, and some of you might have attended that session too. So I want to create a Logic app. So it is asking me, so previously we used to have only consumption plan. In last couple of months back, they included a new type called standard. The difference between consumption and standard is consumption pay as you go. Standard is a flat price monthly, and it will have a dedicated CPUs so that with those dedicated CPUs it will process. But consumption plan based on your load, it will work. And I will use consumption plan for this Logic app. So I want this Logic app to name as retrieve consumers. Consumer info. I will keep it in central US and enable log analytics. I don't want to do it right now because I don't have any log analytics workspace created. So I will review and create. I will create the Logic app. It should not take more than 30 seconds, but we never know. Yep. Go to resource. I'm going to the resource. So this is the whenever we try to create a logic app, this is the first home screen we get it. It gives some high-level details of, as I said, logic apps are building integration solutions easier than ever, and some of the highlights I already shared in the presentation. For logic apps are like Windows services. Previously, if we want any background jobs or nightly jobs, we create Windows services and Windows schedule on Windows Scheduler they run. We can consider something similar to it. For this logic app to run, it needs a trigger. Trigger means when a message is received in a service bus queue, then I want this logic app to run. When a HTTP request is received, I want this logic app to run. When a new tweet is posted. But in our scenario, we want to build an API. So I think HTTP request when is received is something what we want to go with, because with APIs, we want the request to be sent here, and the implementation will happen in the logic app. So I'm selecting this option. So when an HTTP request is received, so this trigger will create a public URL, HTTP post URL. URL will be generated after save. So we shall go ahead and save it. So it created a public URL. This URL can be accessed from anywhere in the world, because we still do not have any security on top of it. So for now, anyone can try to access if they have this URL. So in our use case, we want to send the customer ID consumer ID. So the request body JSON schema. So it's asking to create a schema for request body. So we can use a sample payload to generate the schema. I already have nodes for sample JSON payload. I pasted and click done. If you see, it created a schema for me. It created a type object with the customer ID and the type string. So I have the customer ID. The next thing is I need to gather demographic information from Salesforce. So I will go back and try to create a connection with Salesforce. So Salesforce Logic App has hundreds of connectors. Since I already used Salesforce connector, it's showing me in the recent list. You can select directly from here. You can search. So, but I'm clicking here directly. So it's asking, what do you want with the Salesforce connection? There's so many actions you have. What action you want? So in our case, we want to retrieve data. I want to retrieve a record. So I want to see whether any action closer to what I'm looking for. So I want to get a record. I will use this. So if you see a connection already, as I mentioned before, for any API or API, these connectors are API connectors. We need to have a connection, like credentials, details. So since I already created one in a resource group, if we create a connection for a specific system like Salesforce, if we create an additional logic app, it will by default take, I already have a API connection built, so it will automatically takes the existing one. That's why we have the connection. Suppose if you want to change the connection, you can change it and I can add a new one. And this is the screen, how it looks. And it will ask, hey, which Salesforce environment you want to sign up for. In my case, I want to sign up for a production environment. I have a developer account, so which is in production. And I want to use this latest Salesforce API version. if I click sign, a dialog box will open and it will ask me to sign, enter my information, means credentials. So it's OAuth and automatically I will be signing. Since I already signed in, so I will close this and I will cancel this. So I already have the connection here, so I will leave it as is. So what we want to do is we want to retrieve customer demographics. For that, I want to pull, in Salesforce, tables are called objects. So the customer information is in accounts table. So I selected accounts table. It needs the record ID so that it can pull. So I already have the record ID in the previous step. So when I click here, this dialog box is automatically showing me the previous step and the output. And I'm selecting the customer ID from here. So the customer ID coming here. So good, I'm getting Salesforce data. Next, I want to connect to SQL Server and get revenue data. So I already have a Azure database in the resource group. I created an Azure database and this is the database and the server. So I have a table for revenue. So I will try to connect to it. So now I'm connecting to a SQL database connector. Here I want to get a row. So I can see a row and rows. Since I just want a row, so I'll select a row. So if you see, there is a SQL connection already exists. I used SQL authentication for the connection. So it's asking me what's the server name. Since the connection already established, I can see the connection server name is pre-populated, and database name is also pre-populated. There is only one database, that's why it's only showing one name. Table name also pre-populated, and since there is only one table, it's only showing one. And this row ID should be a primary key. In say SQL Server, we can create a table without a primary key. And if you want to use row ID, it does not work. Your table should have a primary key, then only this connector operation for a role ID will work. So unique identifier of the row to retrieve. So the customer ID is the primary key in the table. So I want to select the same input, JSON input. So I cannot scroll down, so maybe I can search here. It is customer ID. So there is already a customer ID in Salesforce. Should I select this or this? I should select the input because I don't know what this ID in Salesforce is. This might have a different meaning. So I'll select the input. So I'm getting a record from Salesforce. I'm also getting a record from SQL. Now the next step is I want to send this data. I want to transform this data in the output JSON, how I want it in the output JSON, expected output, and I want to send it as a response. So I will create a new step. So I want the response out for this request. So I will search for response. So there is under HTTP, there is also a response. So I will select this response. So I can send any status code. I can I want this if the above 2 steps are successful, I want this to be 200, and I want to send a body. Instead of creating the response body, I already copied before. So I'll just paste this snippet. So this is my JSON, output JSON. So the billing state is coming from Salesforce. Customer name is coming from Salesforce. Last year revenue is coming from SQL, phone, and so this is how So I want to save this. Now I want to test this out. Is this working? So I want to test this out. So I want to run the trigger. Since this is a HTTP trigger, Logic app automatically give run with payload, because HTTP I enabled input JSON, the JSON format. So it gives that option to us. So it's a post method, and I want to post a body. So I already have a consumer ID. I'm sorry, customer ID. So I will paste it in the body. I'll try to run this. So it is 200, and I already got the data. That's cool. So the demographics is coming from Salesforce, and revenue is coming from SQL Server. Yep, this is what I'm hoping for. So the first step of the implementation is done. Before I go forward, does anyone have any questions? So no. So I'll go ahead. So the next thing, so the implementation part is done. Azure Logic, we are getting the data when we are sending the input, the response in the way we want. Yes. So we'll talk about hosting. So how to host this and how to make it as an API. So for this, I would like to use Azure API Management Service. What is Azure API? APIM is a short form. What is that? It's a fully managed service that enables customers to publish, secure, transform, maintain, and monitor APIs. With a few clicks in Azure portal, you can create an API facade that acts as front door for external and internal APIs. Data or business logic implemented by backend services can run on app service, hosted outside Azure, in private data center, function apps, and logic apps. So it can run a logic app. So that's why we would like to use this APIM service. The APIM competitors are MuleSoft, Anypoint Platform, Postman, Dell Boomi, WSO2, API Manager. I will quickly go with the API Management Service demo. Does anyone have any questions on the API Management Service before I start the demo? So the Logic app is done, so I will go to the home page again. I already created an API management service, but before that, I just want to show how easy if I want to create an API management service. Click create. There's only one resource group I have. I need to give some organizational name. I can give this name for now. I can click review and create. And that's it. And the pricing tier, by default, it took developer. One second, I want to show you guys the different pricing tiers. One second. The scroll is too far. So there is no SLA for a developer. There is basic, standard, premium, and consumption. All the options will have different pricing tiers. So this Learn Me will show the more details. Since I already have an APIM already created, so I'm not planning to create one. I will use the one already created. So I'll go to this APIM, and on the left-hand side, you should find APIs. So what are we trying to do is we want to create a new API. So I'll click new API. This screen is already here. It's asking, hey, what kind of API you're planning to create? Are you planning to create a blank API, WebSocket, Open API, WADL, WSDL, or Logic app service, or function app? Since the focus, since we already have the implementation in the Logic app, I will select the Logic app. So it's asking to select a Logic app. So when we browse, I see two Logic apps. One, the testing one, which I created this morning, and the other one is the one we just created, retrieve consumer info. So suppose if I have other Logic apps, like if I have a Logic app with a trigger whenever a message is received in service bus queue, that Logic app will not show up here. The reason is API and Logic apps will only work with that HTTP request. Only HTTP request trigger Logic apps in that subscription will show here. So this is the Logic app we created. So I will select this, retrieve consumer info. It's pre-populated. So I cannot change this name, but I want to change the display name because I don't want the display of the API to be LAPP. So I will remove this and I will keep retrieve consumer info. And the name is, this is the top level API. And I'll go ahead and create this. So cannot create API with the same API. Okay, so I will give it a suffix. So the display name, I'll keep it customer info. I will do retrieve info. I will create this. So a new API is created called customer info. And I want to go into the settings of this consumer info. So the description, I want to change the description. This will retrieve consumer demographics and new data. If you see this URL, this is the HTTP request URL. I initially said this is a public URL. So it's using this URL to call whenever, if anyone try to reach this consumer info. And I want to assign product. So product is a section where in an organization we have many products. We can have sales products, we have marketing products. So if this API is for sales team, and I can set this as sales products. So if a sales team already, if I say all the sales products will have same access and they can use it. Since I don't have any products, so I will just select unlimited for now. And I will leave everything as is. And I will go ahead and save this. So I added some metadata to the settings. So I want to test and see whether this API is actually working. So this API has only one operation since I only uploaded one. So it already pulled the definition of the request. And it's already showing me, hey, input customer ID so that as a request body. So what I will do is I will copy the one from my snippet and I will drop it here. I'll try to send. Boom, I got 200. OK. It appended a lot of APIM headers, APIM related headers. So if I scroll down, I have the response here. It's pulling the same kind of data, and which is what I'm looking for. That's good. Then, and I know you guys, any APIs, there will be developer portals like Swagger. In the same way, there is a developer portal for APIM service too. What it means is this place is a configuration place. Maybe admins might configure your API, but if you want to test it, maybe developers might not have access to try directly here. For that reason, there is a developer portal, and the URL for the developer portal is here. If you create a new developer, if you create a new API management service, you need to publish your developer portal first. For that, you need to open it from here. I am not trying to click it because if I click it from here, it will open it in a customization mode. So I don't want it to open in a customization mode, but first time you have to open it in the customization mode. Then only you can publish your APIs to this portal. There is a section on the left-hand side, developer portal. After opening it, we have to come to the portal overview, and we have to click this publish. I already published. There is already a revision. Since there is, so I'm not planning to publish again. But I want to make sure my new API is already in the developer portal. If it's there, I don't have to publish anything. If it's not, I will come back and publish. So I enabled course, and I also enabled Azure AD so that I can log in with Azure AD. So I want to go to this site right now. Where is, 1 second. I want to open this developer portal URL. I'm copying this URL. I'll open it here. So this is the sign-in page. The developer portal, as I mentioned, if I open it from this link, it will open in a customization mode. Then I can add my company logo. I can change this color to any color. I can move this button here. I can do anything, and I can add in new links. So I can customize this whole site. Since this is how the vanilla flavor, how we get it, and I'm just going with it for now. I want to sign in. I already have a sign in. So looks like it already cached it. So I will click sign in. Hope it will sign in. Yep, it's signed. So I want to explore all the APIs. Yep, the consumer info which we created is already here. But for the first time, when you create this APIM, you have to create a subscription for yourself. So after you signed up, you will have an account here. Then you have to come back to subscriptions and create a subscription for yourself. In companies, generally, admins do that. So I created a subscription for myself. Once I created my subscription, if I go into my profile, I can see my subscription key. Without this subscription, even if I create the sign up to this portal, I won't see the subscription keys. I need in APIM, any request to any APIM API needs a subscription key. This is an individual subscription key. We also create subscription for products. For example, if any app or an API wants to communicate, we create a subscription for a product. For example, like a marketing site. The marketing site will need to call an APIM API. Then it will use the marketing site subscription key instead of my subscription key, so that all these details will be stored in App Insights, and we can go back for logs and see where the activity is coming from. So now I want to go back to the APIs. Here is my consumer info API. So if you see, it pulls some of the metadata. This is the metadata added, so it retrieved the metadata. Suppose if you have a Swagger JSON or OpenAPI format definition, here I only have customer ID. In real-time examples, our request objects are too big, and every data element have definition. So everything will be shown here. Since I have only one thing, it's not showing much, and I only have 200 status. That's why it's showing only 200 and 500. But in enterprises, we have different kinds of responses. What if it's 403? How we need to display the message? So more information more metadata can be added here. But I want to keep it simple for now. I want to try this from the developer portal too, and see how it works. So since I already have a subscription key, it's automatically selecting my primary subscription key. So I don't have to input it. That's good. So it's asking my customer ID. So I will copy and paste my snippet. So I got 200. So it's something similar to the testing side, how we did. So nice. I'm getting the response back. Now I want to try the same from a Postman, because we generally use Postman for testing. So for using this in Postman, there are a few things we need to talk about. So app settings, app registrations. App registrations are we need to register our app in this app registrations, and using this client ID and client secret, that will be our API credentials to communicate this API. So when I created this, when I created the developer portal automatically created this APIM Azure user group app registration. It's auto created it. So when it created, it automatically added the API permissions. It was previously added the APIM access, but for some reason it removed. But anyhow, in this session, I'm not in an enterprise environment. Our app registration should have access to the API which we published, but I'm not planning to show that. It will take time. So in this app registration, I want to create a client secret. So I will use the secret. So I already created a secret for the Postman, and so I don't want to create a new secret. I will utilize this. I already copied it in my notepad, this one. So I will use this, and this is my client ID, and here is the client ID. So I'll go back to the Postman. When you try to hit a PIM API from Postman, it's a two-step process. When you're doing it in Logic app or APIM test suite or developer portal, we don't need authorization from the Azure AD, because we are already in all those tools are built by Azure, and we already logged in. So the authorization automatically happens. So we don't have to do that. So, but when you try from Postman, we need to fill this authorization. So I created, we need to get a token for the authorization. So for the token URL, this is the URL and this is the tenant ID. So we need to make sure that is the right tenant ID. Yep, this is the tenant ID, starts with B7. And we want the client ID and client secret. And client ID start with 012. Yes. And I already have the client secret. Everything looks good. So this is the URL is different. This URL is one from the testing I did a little before. So I will create. I'll copy the URL we created from the new Logic app which we published in the API. So this is the retrieve info which we published. So I will use this URL. I will change this to here. Now we'll go into the body. We shall see in the body. So in the header, I need to pass in APIM subscription key. This is a subscription key I copied from the developer portal in the primary subscription key. Without subscription key, we cannot call. We'll get a 403 error. So I already have it. I have updated the URL. I want to see whether there is a body. Yes, I do have a body. I want to, this response is from a previous call with a different URL. I changed the URL. I want to see whether this works. Yep, this URL works. So since the data is same, so I got the same. And I will try a different ID to see whether data changes. You know what? Maybe I selected the same. Yeah, maybe I selected the same. Yep, data changed. So it's working. I have a working API. This Postman is an example of how we build, how we use the API in our apps. So far, anyone have any questions?
There was one comment from Mike around. I can read it out for you, Karthik.
Sure.
Speaking from an infrastructure perspective, so far you have made it sound as if Azure Logic Apps allows you to be platform agnostic, citizen developer like. Yes. So do you think it's more intended for citizen developers? I guess.
Do you mean like seasoned developers? Do you? I do not.
Citizen developers like who don't know how to code, like people who use services like Power Apps and Power Platform.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. So it will Logic app is for the people. Not only, for example, I'm a .NET developer. I'm a full stack developer. In my team, we use Logic app heavily. We have more than 50 Logic apps. We can use function app, but we have Blue Cross is a health industry business. We have a lot of business rules. When something happens, we want something else to happen. So, and these business rules keep on changing every 3 or 4 months because of the industry mandates or so many things. So the business want changes soon. They want so Logic apps doing it in a Logic app and testing it out is so easy. And if our business rules and logic is increasing and the steps in Logic apps are growing, then we take a step, we will generally we build it in function app. Not only seasoned developers, I know friends in other companies too, for their background processes, for integrations. They use Logic apps today, and so admins can also use. Anyone can use it. Did I answer your question?
Hope that answers your question, Mike. That's pretty much what we have it on the chat window, Karthik.
Sure. If no questions, I will go back to my slides. So, few additional APIM features. APIM has tons of features. We can set tons of policies, caching, throttling, data translations. These are a few things I just posted here, but more can be done. So I want to show few of the APIM policies, the power of APIM policies, and how all these are incorporated into App Insights. So for this, I'll go back to the APIM. So I am in app registration, so I'm going back to the APIs. So consumer info is the one we published. So going back to my slideshow, you know what, so I want to show, I want to build a policy for caching data. What it means is, as I showed you, it is a two-step process, authorization, and so every call, it will call Azure AD to get the token. But do I need to call Azure AD to get the token every time? Because every call, it's little cost effective. We want our API response to be too quick. So maybe we can cache. We can cache our authorization data. So for that, we go here and policies. I want to set a policy for not all operations. I only want to set it for manual invoke. This manual invoke is built through Logic app. So there is policies here. I click on it. I have some base policies, and I can see different snippets of policies. I want to build a caching policy, get from the cache. So I want the cache to be on the inbound. We have inbound and outbound. So since if I click get from the cache, I get some snippet which I can use it. For this, to save time, I will just use the snippet in my notepad to save my time. So I want an inbound cache. This inbound cache. So I'm caching accept in the header, accept char set, and authorizations. Authorization is the main thing. If authorization exists, I don't want to look every call, but I don't want to just set it like never ending. So I want time lapse on this cache. So for that, I will use outbound cache also. The outbound cache will use cache. So the cache store duration 20 seconds. So this duration is in seconds. So I want to store this authorization for 20 seconds. After 20 seconds, I want it to request the Azure AD to get the new token. And In my company, we generally use like an hour. Every hour we want the token to be refreshed. So I will save this policy. So I'll go back to the Postman. So if you see, it's taking 769 milliseconds. So I want to send this. So it took 1678 milliseconds. So I will try one more time. It was reduced to 947. See, I think cache started working, 459. So it's half that time, 586. So it will increase again, and it will. So basically, what I'm trying to show is that the response time is reduced from initial. So basically, it's not retrieving the authorization. It's just using the cached one. The next one I want to talk about is throttling. So in cloud, there's a lot of Autobots and hackers if they try to hit our APIs. So if we want to block it, we can set maybe like a SLA. Sometimes when we build an API and we based on the user needs, and we say that this API can be called 1,000 times in 1 minute, like an SLA. So we can set some SLAs on the rate of the calls. So for that, I want to use a small code snippet. For the throttling, the rate limit by keys. So I will call, and I will drop this in the policies in inbound underneath the cache. So this rate limit, what I'm saying is, for testing, in the renewal period of 30 seconds, in every 30 seconds, we are not allowing more than 5 calls for a same IP address. I have very small limits for testing. If it is more than 5 calls, it won't. The request will stop it. It won't go to the. It won't call the Azure AD, or it won't go to the implementation part. So I will go back to the same Postman. I'll try to click this. So the first one is more than 1,000 milliseconds. It will reduce. It will reduce. It will reduce. I'm clicking repeatedly. So I clicked the 6th time. So it said that rate limit is exceeded. Try again in 17 seconds. So we can we can set some policies on throttling, so we can meet the SLAs and not to have more calls and data translations. For example, so I think it crossed 17 seconds. I will try. So this billing state is coming from Salesforce. The billing state in Salesforce system, the state is stored as 2-letter word, but the business want the full name. They want Texas, and we don't have control on the Salesforce system. Salesforce system is an external system, and we don't have much control. So we can build data transformations, and we can create a policy for that too. So I already have a small data transformation. I will copy it, and I will also show from the snippets. So I'm going back to the here, and I want to show the snippets. This data transformation, we need to keep it in the outbound because we want that to happen in the response. So if I click show snippets, if you see in transformation policies, find and replace. So for example, if your customer, if our API, if our input is JSON, but suppose our API can only take XML, then we can have an JSON to XML converters, mask URLs, rewrite URLs. So there are a lot of things, and this list is growing. So there are a lot of things we can do, alterations of our request and response based on the needs. So in this case, I am adding this find and replace. If there is any want it to be stored, the response should be Texas. So I want to save this and see whether it works. I'm going back to the Postman. See, the change happened instantly. And I also talked about app insights. So if API management is nothing but holding all the API. It's an orchestrator of all our APIs. So sometimes we also want to make sure how all these APIs are performing. Are there any errors happening, and how to handle it? So for that, there is some we have app insights incorporated into the here. We have to create an app insights manually. So for example, I created in Azure user group, I created an app insight. I created a standalone app insights, and I tied up this app insights to the API. In the same way, you can create multiple app insights and tie up here. And based on, for example, if you have many APIs, you can set one app insights to track sales APIs. You can have a different app insights to track marketing APIs. So in order to add an app insights, you can add the app insight. The list will be here, and you can add a description so that you know what is used for what. And since when I selected it, I said add availability, and for all APIs, I selected it for the all APIs. And so I will go to this, and I want to see, because we are testing from the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes. I want to see if there is any traffic in the here. It takes time. In general, app insights, whenever the request is made, in order to see the data of the request in app insight, it generally takes like 2 to 3 minutes. See, app insights loaded. By default, it's 1 hour selected. There is one failed request. Well, what is this failed request? I want to see what the request is, why it failed. There's one 429 response code and gateway error. I want to know what this error is. So when I click here, oh, the rate limit is exceeded. So since the rate limit is exceeded, that's why it failed. And if you see, there's as I said, from last 15 to 20 minutes, there is traffic. We are making multiple calls. We are trying to test. So the retrieve info is our API. So and this is our consumer info API. There are 22 count calls, and we can go more details. And most of 68% are 200, and it will give a lot of insight into our APIs, and we can see some samples. Since I'm in Azure AD, so it was showing my name. Cool. Going back to my slides. Questions? Any questions, guys?
Yes, Mike asked another question. He asked, is there any security concern with using the cached tokens?
Means based on your needs. if in this case, if the consumer info is not protected information, if for example, if the response, if the data is like a public information, for example, it's Netflix titles, or if it is publicly accessible, maybe we can have a the token to be longer time. But if it is sensitive information and we want the token to be refreshed every time, we can do that. And also, for example, if a same client is calling it multiple times, then maybe the business might we might set rules like for 5 minutes we don't need to request the token because the same client is calling. We can work with our security team to figure out what those client profile. We can figure out their client IDs or client credentials. Somehow we can get the attributes and set some caching rules around it. My cache rules are very minimal, very simple, but I don't think the real-time examples will be as simple as this. They will be very robust, and for sure we have to work with our admins on part of these tokens and then security pieces to make sure we are compliant with our infrastructure security. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, Mike says yes. If there are no more slides, Karthik, we can probably open the floor for any other questions so people can unmute themselves and ask you questions directly.
Please, please.
Yeah, please go ahead. If you have any specific questions for Karthik, please feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask Karthik now. Silence on the floor means...
Sorry, I was on mute. I do have a question for you. This is John Brewer. How are you doing?
Good, good. Please go ahead.
You mentioned earlier you had about 50 logic apps in your environment. Do you guys have a testing strategy that you use around those to help you either unit test or mock test those? And if you do, can you explain that a little bit? Because that's usually a spot where you will fight with developers that they're not easy to test.
Yeah. Hey, we don't have a true unit test like how we test our code in a .NET projects. Developer do the developer testing. So we get business give the means we have product owner. So product owner and testers, they will create the test cases for all the scenarios. Developer will do high level testing with all those scenarios. If it works, the tester will. The problem here is, as I mentioned before, our process is so big. It's like it's a sequential process. So the data in the Logic app, either it comes from a service bus or it comes through from a storage account, or whenever an action happens in a Salesforce, or whenever a record is changed in SQL Server. So we have different varied things, kinds of tricks. So that's why what we do is we do end-to-end regression testing, and our testers generally handle it, and developers only test their piece. And if the regression testing fails, then when a bug will be created, and we'll go and try to figure it out. But I'm not sure a true unit test for these cases. With Logic apps, based on my knowledge, because Logic app just does not work. They have to work with a trigger.
It might help, John. There is a feature called static results.
Yeah, I was wondering
it lets you mock some of the data coming from those external systems. I'm not sure what all connectors it supports, but I have tried that with HTTP action, and it does work. You can mock the response coming from the HTTP system, and test a logic app. Other than that, I've seen some of the other organizations use tools like SpecFlow to test their logic apps, but to your point, it's really difficult to test these logic apps because it's purely low code, and if unit testing and it is something you are looking for, probably Azure Functions might be a better choice to implement your APIs there. But try
Yep,
out
yep.
static results.
Yep, exactly.
And
I did. I
go
was
ahead.
thinking of that myself, and I put that link to that in the chat. That has always been a challenge, and haven't found a good way to set up, any kind of automated testing. If you have HTTP triggers, you can do it fairly easily. But if they're triggered by, like you said, other actions like storage or SQL tables or any other of the other triggers, those are really hard to automate.
Another thing you can try out, John, is using the new hosting option for these logic apps, which is built on top of app service plans that lets you test your logic apps locally because it runs on the Azure Function Runtime. But the classic consumption-based logic app, the one that Karthik was showing in his demo, you cannot really test them locally. So that's the challenge with them for sure.
Yeah, that is. I've heard of that too. That is really cool. Be able to run that engine locally because it sits on top of Azure Functions basically.
Yeah. So yeah, try
Another
that.
good option. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. It is definitely something that is more like you said, citizen developer. That's really kind of the arena that some of this comes in, integration, where you small integration things you want to do. Yeah.
And,
Thank you.
And we also use static analysis. Suppose if Salesforce is down, for example, so we don't want during testing, we don't want the testing to be stopped. So we do static analysis and make that step pass whatever the response we want. Just sharing how other different ways why we use the static analysis.
Great. Good stuff. Thank you.
If no one else has any more questions for Karthik, Karthik, is that pretty much your slides? Do you have anything else to cover?
No. I mostly have demos, and yeah.
Awesome. On behalf of the user group, I'd like to thank you, Karthik, once again for taking the time. I think it's really important to understand how easy Azure makes it for developers to create their APIs and consume them without writing a single line of code. So thanks once again.